So by the time I started working on guitars, I had already gone all the way through the ranks to the very top echelon of finishing shops in New York City.
Okay.
One of the reasons, well, what happened is after I started, I switched over into Lutherie, and of course, mostly I did some building, but mostly we did a lot of repair work. I was a Martin warranted repair person and all that. And one year, I think it was around 82 or 83, I went to some luthiers convention, the informal meeting, and this one guy who apparently was the finishing expert of that particular little group gave this lecture. And I'm sitting there thinking, you have no idea what you're talking about. And what I realized right away is that guitar finishing compared to furniture finishing and decorator finishing is extremely limited. You only do a few finishes, whereas a fully trained finisher in the field I was in had to know how to do absolutely everything. And there's a whole lot of stuff that simply will not ever show up on guitars. So I understood that they had a limited scope, but even what they were using, I mean, this guy had no idea what he was talking about, just didn't know his stuff at all. Well, at the end of that session, a couple people from the organizers came over and said, would you teach tomorrow? And I said, sure. And I did. And at the end of that, they said, would you do it again? We need, people are asking for more sessions.
It does seem almost like two different paths, like woodworking finishing, furniture finishing and guitar finishing. Boy, you would think that they were more similar than they were, but it does seem like they're kind of like they're asking the finish to do kind of different things, like to some degree.
The only thing I can think of that's actually different, I mean, finishers would see guitar finishing as merely a subset of finishing. Mm-hmm. It's one small area of it.
Yeah.
The only thing that's different is that typically guitars, especially if you do them in lacquer, you're going to want a lacquer that's going to go through more freeze cycles, more cold check cycles than normal furniture does. Mm-hmm. Normal furniture needs to tolerate a few cycles because once it's put in a home, it pretty much stays there and its environment is consistent. Whereas musical instruments routinely go in and out of hot rooms into cold outside, or from cold cars into hot rooms and vice versa. So they go through, they have to tolerate a lot more cold check cycles. So that is the one unique characteristic about guitar lacquer. It has to tolerate more cold check cycles than normal furniture lacquer.
So I had heard, like when we think of Gibson and we think of the Kalamazoo stuff and all those finishes, I had heard that they were, like a lot of that stuff, they were borrowing directly from the furniture industry in Michigan. Do you know much about that?
All finishes come from the furniture industry.
Yeah.
There were a few formulators that would modify stuff to suit guitar makers, but it's basically all finishes that came from the furniture industry.
Okay.
So during my time in the business, one of the companies that was willing to formulate for guitar makers was Lawrence McFadden. Mm-hmm. The head formulator there was a guy named Neil Wooler. And Neil was very astute and very conscious of what we needed, and he would formulate materials that worked for guitars. So Lawrence McFadden actually made a guitar lacquer. And again, the difference is that it went through more cold check cycles. It went at least 20 cycles, which is very unusual for standard furniture lacquer.
What exactly is a cycle? Does that mean like it'll go, a certain amount of time, or?
A cold check cycle is a testing mechanism in which you take the finished piece after it's cured and you raise it to a certain temperature and then very quickly drop it to a different temperature. Usually it's at least 100 degrees apart.
Okay, cool.
And back up again. And every time you go up and down, you drop it and raise it. And again, that's one cycle.